This is a bizarre experience I had a couple of years ago. During this particular time, I was looking for a new apartment. I'd been living with a roommate in this really run-down, beat-up old place. I had recently got a new job and finally had a little money to get a place all to myself, and a place that would be nicer as well. The kind of apartment I wanted did not have to be perfect, but I certainly wanted something better than I currently had. This would only be my second apartment that I ever got, and the first by myself. I was excited about it and looked online for the new place. I was still pretty new to living in this general area and had moved there from another state when I got my apartment with the roommate. So I went onto an apartment search website, put in my budget and preferences, and looked through the results. After looking at some apartments online, I selected one that I wanted to take a tour of. It seemed like a really good deal and looked decent from the pictures, so I contacted the management for a tour. I filled out some forms and then was ready to look at the place a couple of days later. When the time came for the tour, I drove to the apartment complex, which was maybe 10 minutes away. However, after entering the complex, I was unimpressed, and I realized that I may have made a mistake even by selecting to have a tour. I had pretty much already made up my mind that I didn't want to move here. Overall, the place really didn't look any nicer than where I currently lived. The pictures online were real, but they sure made the place look a lot better. Still, I got out of my car and met the tour guide, which happened to be the property manager and landlord. I think he really did just about everything. We met, and he said that he would give me a tour of the unit because the people had just moved out. So I went inside with him, and the apartment building smelled old and musty. Inside the place, the carpet was old and beat up, and there was a spider web with a spider in it in one of the cupboards. The guy was talking really good about the place, as if it was super nice. He mentioned that he lived in the unit next door, and we would be neighbors. I was nice and stayed there for the whole tour. When it was over, the guy asked me if I would take the apartment. I said that I had to look at others first, but would let him know if I wanted it. He did the old salesman technique, saying that he had a bunch of other people interested in the unit, and he even said that he had it on hold from them so that I could tour the place. I didn't know if that was true or not, but I knew he was trying to pressure me. He said he had rearranged things so that I could take the tour, so he hoped that I would take the place. I told him that I could not agree to it right now, and if he had to give the apartment to somebody else, so be it, but I had to look at some other ones. The guy seemed disappointed, but then we said our goodbyes and I left. So after this, I knew I wasn't going to move there, and I went home and continued my search. I decided to raise my budget and realized that I could actually afford something a lot nicer than that dump. The next day, I received a call from the landlord of the apartment I had just looked at. I answered, and he asked me if I was going to take the place. I told him that I decided I was not going to be taking it and would look elsewhere. The man sounded very upset. He said that he had it on hold for me and claimed that he lost other renters because of it. I told him I didn't know that, but I never made a promise that I was going to move there, and I wasn't going to do it. After that, the man continued talking and said that he could possibly lower the rent for me. I still said I wasn't interested. I honestly had no desire to live there, even if it was free, especially knowing that this guy would be my next door neighbor if I did. The guy asked me why I didn't want to move in. I found it strange that he was still talking to me about this. I didn't want to talk to the guy anymore, so I told him that I was just going to look in another area, and then I said bye and hung up. The whole thing was very strange. It was pretty unprofessional, to be honest, but it would get more unprofessional. So that evening, the guy called me again. I don't remember the exact time, but I think it was around 7 p.m. or so. It was really strange. I couldn't imagine what he could possibly want. I didn't answer it, and when the ringing ended, he did not leave a message or anything. The next morning, when I woke up, I noticed that my phone had actually been called another time. He had called in the middle of the night at like 2 a.m. I was hoping that this was just an accident, but this time he did leave a message. When I played it, he simply said that he was trying to get a hold of me and to call him back. I didn't want to, so I blocked his number. I thought that was the end of it, and I would never see him again or hear from him again. That story is strange enough as it is. But a couple of nights later, I was at home with my roommate. I was in my room, and it was sometime at night, maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, and then there was a knock at the door. I didn't know who it could be, but I was possibly expecting somebody to be there to see my roommate. I knew that I wasn't expecting anyone, so I stayed where I was. But a few moments later, my roommate came to my doorway and asked if I invited a guy over. I said no, and she said that some guy was at the front door. At first, I really had no idea who it could be, so I walked over to the door and looked through. The same guy was standing there. It was the landlord from the other apartment building. I had no idea what he could possibly want. As I was standing there, he knocked again. I shouted from the other side, asking what he wanted. He asked if he could come inside, and I said no. He then said that he would only come inside for a minute. I said that if he didn't leave now, I was going to call the police. The man finally cursed at me, kicked at the door, and then stormed off. And after that, he luckily did not come back. I still don't know why that guy kept bothering me. I figured that he got my address on the forms that I had to fill out to look at his apartment. I wish that I never looked at that place at all. I ended up getting a much nicer place a short time later, and have been living there since. This happened back sometime in the very early 2000s. During this time, I was living alone in a one-bedroom apartment that I had recently moved into. I was aware of a few of my neighbors, but not many of them. The building seemed to have people moving in and out quite often. It was a larger apartment building that had a giant parking lot next to it where all the residents parked. The apartment itself was pretty old, and not the nicest, but it was alright. So after a few months of living there, I remembered that one night I heard this sort of pounding noise coming from the next apartment over. I wasn't sure what it was. I knew that it was my next door neighbor though. The noise went on and off as it got later and later. Soon I was trying to go to sleep, but the sounds kept going. I had a hard time falling asleep because of it, and eventually I couldn't take it anymore and I had to go over there. I really didn't want to, but I was left no choice. So I walked over and then knocked on the door. After a few moments, a man opened the door. He was a large man that was bald and wore baggy clothes. He looked at me confused and slightly annoyed. I told him that I was trying to sleep and I was hearing him do something. I asked him if he was hanging stuff on the walls or something like that. The man said no, he was building a table. I guess that made sense, but I asked if he could quiet down because I could not sleep. The guy looked really annoyed, but said okay, and then shut the door in my face. I felt really awkward after, but it was almost midnight, so I went back, and the man did stop, and I was finally able to get some sleep. The next I saw of the guy was actually the very next day though. It was nighttime once again. Now I was about to go to sleep. Out of nowhere, I heard this really loud music coming from next door. It was the same guy's apartment. I rolled my eyes when I heard it. I just hoped that it wouldn't last for very long. The walls in this apartment were pretty thin, so noise traveled, but still, this music had to be almost full blast, and it continued until past when I wanted to go to sleep. I didn't want to go over to his place for a second night in a row. I wondered if this was his way of getting back at me or something. I mean, he knew that he was being loud. So I tried my best to sleep. I didn't have any earplugs, but I tried covering my ears and stuff, but I just couldn't. After trying to fall asleep for over an hour and the music still continuing, I realized that I had to go confront the man. So I left my apartment and I walked on over. After knocking on his door, he did not answer. I waited there for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, knocking several more times. Soon it was clear though that the guy was not going to answer me. So then I headed back to my place. I went back inside, hoping maybe the guy would eventually turn it off, or I could get some rest anyways. Just after making it back to my place though, I thought I heard a door open and close from the hallway. Then, moments later, I heard somebody trying to open my apartment door. Luckily, I had locked it right away when I got back in, which was a habit. This seemed strange, so I went over to check. The man was standing right there. I did not want to open the door because I had a bad feeling. He remained there for a few moments, just standing there and looking angry. Then he turned around and walked back to his place, with the loud music still playing. He did not turn it off. I don't even know when I fell asleep, but when I woke up the next morning, the music had been stopped at some point. After that, I reported the guy to the apartment, but I guess he moved out a very short time later. It was good because I didn't have to deal with him anymore. That was the craziest memory of living in an apartment. I used to live in this old apartment when I was younger. It was really an old house that was converted into a duplex, I guess. I had a kitchen, living room, bedroom, and bathroom. Then there was a staircase going down to a very small entryway and the door. The other side, I guess, had basically the same thing, but I didn't know who lived there or anything. So I lived in this apartment for several months. It was cheap and pretty close to my work. Other than that, it was nothing special. I never knew anything strange to happen over the course of the first month that I lived there. I pretty much would be at work a lot, but when I was home I never had any problems. But then there were a few nights where I realized I was waking up in the middle of the night. I just know that I woke up and then went back to sleep pretty much right away one time. Then, another time, I woke up to what I thought was a noise, but I didn't hear anything more after waking up. I remember sitting up in bed and listening closely, but did not hear anything at all. So eventually, I just went back to sleep. This was strange because I normally slept really well and never woke up in the night. These were situations that I didn't even necessarily remember during the next day. But then, when I woke up in the middle of the night for a third time in about a week, I was sure I heard a noise, and I found it really strange. Once more, I sat up and listened, but I didn't hear any more noises. I couldn't figure out if I was dreaming the noise or if it happened when I was awake. It just seemed pretty strange. But after a while of nothing again, I finally fell back asleep. I wasn't really sure what was going on, or what was the cause of me waking up. But then, one of the very next nights, I remember that I woke up again. I don't really remember hearing any noises, but I also was like wide awake immediately after waking up, which was weird. I didn't sit up, but rolled over to my other side. I was looking in the rest of the room, which was completely dark, but I then heard a small creaking sound. It was as if my bedroom door was being opened slowly. I looked over and saw that it was. Then I saw somebody suddenly enter the room from the doorway. It was a man, but I couldn't make out any details. The guy took a step into the room, but did not advance any farther. I was literally too scared to move. It was so dark that I'm not sure if he knew I was awake or not. The man then took out some sort of camera and took a picture of me. Then he disappeared back behind the doorway, going into the hall. I honestly couldn't believe it. I didn't know what on earth was happening. Then I heard some creaking from the floor in the hallway, and I heard a noise like a door being opened and closed. It was quiet but noticeable. After that, everything went completely silent again. I sat in bed without hearing anything for probably the next 10 or 20 minutes. I wasn't sure if I was being robbed or what, but I hadn't heard any noises in a long time. I finally got up and walked around my bedroom. There still was no other sounds, and then I left and went out into the hallway. I turned on a light and did not see or hear anything. Then I went around every room slowly and looked around. My place really wasn't that big, so it didn't take me long to realize that the other person was gone. But when I got to the end of the hallway upstairs, past my bedroom and across from a closet, I realized what must have happened. There was a door leading to my next door neighbors. However, this door I was told was not in use and was always locked. It even had a small table with a lamp on it in front of it, and the door was painted the same color as the wall, so it wasn't really that noticeable. But I knew that had to be where the person had gone. For some reason, the door must not be locked on the other side. After that, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up the rest of the night. In the morning, as soon as I was able to, I contacted the management for my place. I reported what was happening, and I started looking for another apartment immediately. The next few nights, I stayed at a friend's. Long story short, there was a man who lived next door, and he was caught. I'm happy that he never got in my place again after that. The times I had been waking up must have been when he left to go back to his place, possibly when he was closing the door. I will never forget seeing him in my room. It was the creepiest situation that's ever happened to me. I live in what I would describe as a pretty standard apartment. The last one I lived in 2 years ago was very similar as well. The building had a few basic hallways and tons of units. I had a parking space in the underground garage, and there were several apartment buildings in the complex. It was like right in the middle of my lease when I had been living there for about 6 months when some weird things happened. My apartment was on the second floor of the building, kind of towards the end of a hallway. One night, I was awoken to the sound of banging on my door. This happened to be a Friday night at about 3 o'clock in the morning. Somebody was repeatedly banging on my door, and it seemed about as loud as they could. I just laid there in bed and waited for it to stop. But after it continued for about 10 seconds straight, I decided to get up. However, once I had made it out of my bedroom, the knocking finally stopped. I could hear somebody walking away down the hallway then. I went to the peephole and I looked out, but the person was gone. I didn't really want to open the door and look out into the hallway, so I didn't. I just went back to bed and didn't hear any more knocks. The next day, I was thinking about it, remembering being woken up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I figured at that point it was probably somebody who was coming home drunk from the bars or something. It made perfect sense, because it had been a Friday night, and they probably got back and just started banging on a random door, either just to mess with somebody or because they accidentally went to the wrong place. So I really wasn't that concerned about it. However, at some time the next week, it happened again. Once more, I woke up to someone pounding on my front door. I had a bad feeling about it, not knowing who this was. I didn't really know any of my neighbors. I wasn't sure if it was one of them or somebody else that was random. This time, I did not get up. I just waited for the knocking to end, which took maybe 10 or 20 seconds roughly. When it finally ended, I stayed up for almost another hour because I really wasn't that tired anymore. I was finally able to get back to sleep a while later, but this was pretty annoying. Several nights went by before it happened again. This time, it was a little earlier though. I was still awake and in my living room watching TV. All of a sudden, there was a knock at the door. It seemed normal at first, but then it turned into a loud bang. I was so confused. I really didn't want to get up, and I stayed on my couch. The knocking on the door lasted for the usual 15 seconds or so, and then it stopped. This time, I once more heard the person walking away, and the rest of the night, I didn't hear anything more. Nothing strange happened for a few weeks after that. I had almost forgotten about the whole ordeal, but then randomly, it happened again. This time, once more, I was already awake and in the living room. It was pretty late though, and was after midnight. As I sat on the couch in my living room, I heard this loud pounding on my front door. It was crazy just how hard this person was banging on it. I stayed where I was like usual. This time, it seemed to last a little bit longer though, like maybe around 30 seconds. Then I decided to get up and look. I walked over to the door, and it was like the person heard me. When I got within a couple of feet of the door, the knocking stopped, and I heard them walking away. I looked through my peephole and saw no one. This time, I opened up the door and looked out into the hallway. When I did, I actually saw someone. There appeared to be a man walking away, but I only saw his back. He did not turn around and look at me or anything. The man was walking quickly, and I only saw him for maybe 5 seconds. Then he reached the door that led to the stairs and opened it, and then he was gone. I went back inside after that. For the entire rest of the time that I lived in my apartment, I never heard any more knocking. I don't know who that guy was. I didn't recognize him. Why he chose to always knock on my door, I also don't know. It really gave me the creeps though. My name is Denise, and I used to live in an older apartment close to the city. I lived in it for 1 year total. Over my time living there, I got to know a couple of my neighbors, but not many. I would see some people around the building or in the hallways, but most of them I never had any conversations with or anything. After I'd been living there for almost a year, something odd happened. It was really late at night on a Friday. I was staying up late watching a movie, and I was by myself. All of my lights were off, and I was eating popcorn, when suddenly I heard that somebody was trying to enter my apartment. The front doorknob was rattling, and it startled me. I paused the movie and listened close. The doorknob turned several times. I kind of expected somebody to knock, but they didn't. Whoever was there tried opening the door again. I got up as quietly as I could and tiptoed over to my front door. It wasn't that far away, and when I looked out the peephole, I saw a guy standing right outside. He appeared to be looking closely to my doorknob or lock area, so I couldn't see his face at first. As I leaned my face against the door moved a little bit. When it did, the guy at my door backed up and I saw his face. It was one of my neighbors.
I didn't know his name, and we had said hi to each other a couple of times in the hallway, maybe once or twice. I knew that he lived on my floor and across the hall, about 4 doors down. After he backed up, I saw him walk away back towards his place. I was kind of creeped out. Why was he trying to get into my apartment? I stayed up for a while and looked outside of my door a few more times. I never saw him again though. I was finally able to go to sleep at like 3 a.m. The next morning, I woke up at about 9. When I left my bedroom, I thought I heard something at my front door again. I don't know if I was just paranoid now, but I walked over and looked out of it once again. The same guy was there, my neighbor. He then tried opening the door again. When it didn't open, I saw him just turn around and walk away. I did my best to make sense of this, but I had no idea what he was doing. A couple of days went by. I was leaving to go to work and happened to see my neighbor walking in my direction like we were going to cross paths down the hallway. I wanted to turn around and go back to my place, but I decided not to. When we made it within about 10 feet of each other, we made eye contact. That's when he said hi to me and told me how he had gone to my door the other night. He said that he didn't know if he woke me up or not, but he had accidentally tried to enter my apartment, and he apologized. He told me that he had gotten back home from the bars with friends and was a little drunk. I told him it was all right, and I understood, and then we went our separate ways. But I didn't understand. At first, it all made perfect sense to me, and I felt relieved. But after I thought more about it, I realized that he didn't really seem drunk when he was messing around with my door. And the way that he was messing with it, it was like he was trying to break in, not like he thought that he lived there. And even if he was just drunk, why did he come back and try to get in again the next morning? I don't think that he would still be drunk and wander back to my apartment at 9 a.m. I tried to just tell myself that I was making more of it, and he was telling me the truth. A few more days went by. It was late at night again, and this time I was in my bedroom on my phone. The time was probably about 11 o'clock, and there was a knocking at my door. It was kind of quiet, but I heard it. I got up, walked over to the door, and looked outside. The same guy was back. As I was looking out the people, he knocked again. When he knocked, I accidentally bumped the door forward again with my head. Like I said, my place was kind of old, and the door would rattle in the hinges really easily if you touched it. When the door moved slightly, the guy quickly ducked around the corner. Everybody's doorway went in a little, so if you hid around the corner right in front of it, you could not be seen. I'm not sure what he was doing, but I didn't like it at all. I kept watching, and after about 30 seconds or so, he moved back into view and knocked again. I kept still and did not move. He knocked once more and then finally left. I don't know what he wanted, but I just had a bad feeling about it. Less than a month later, I moved out of that apartment, and I'm glad that I did.
This is something that happened years ago now. It all started one day when I went on Facebook and saw that I had a new friend request. It was from a woman who I didn't know. We did have a mutual friend, which was somebody that I was barely friends with, but lived in the area. I accepted her request without giving it too much thought. I did not click on her profile to learn more about her or anything. Later in the day though, I noticed that she sent me a message on Facebook. I logged back on and saw that she said hi to me. I responded saying hi back to her, and after that we had a brief conversation. The conversation that first day was not too long, just kind of back and forth getting to know each other. But the only thing that this woman really told me about herself was that she was my same age and that she worked in a nearby city. She seemed pretty nice for the most part though. That night, I thought that I saw her at my house. This was probably like 3 hours after our conversation on Facebook. I noticed this car parked across the street from my house on the side of the road. It was an unusual thing to see, and I just randomly noticed it. But when I did, I also saw that there appeared to be a woman in the driver's seat of the car, and she looked an awful lot like the woman messaging me on Facebook. This was really weird. I moved away from the window so that she wouldn't see me. Then I wondered to myself if this woman was possibly one of my neighbors, or if she was at my house for some reason. A short time later, I checked the window again, but she was still there in her car. I thought about messaging her on Facebook, but decided not to. A while later, when I checked the window again, the car was gone. For the rest of that night, I was left wondering what exactly that was about. I was creeped out by this and decided to stop messaging her. But the next day, she messaged me again. We had kind of ended our conversation the previous night. When I had told her that I had to go because I was cooking dinner, she said okay. Then I had not said anything back to her. But now, on this day, she said, "Hey, what's up?" to me. I didn't respond. But just a couple of hours later, she said, "You there?" I finally responded. I asked her what was up, and she asked me how I was doing. After I said good, I asked her what city she lived in. She named a city that was close to mine, but not the same one. This ruled her out as being one of my neighbors. I didn't want to mention that I saw her parked on my street the previous night. I continued with the conversation for a short time, but then the woman asked to meet up with me. She said a time and day, but I told her that I was busy. She continued to message me and then started to become rude. The woman seemed to be upset that I declined her request to meet. I then confronted her, saying that I saw her at my house the previous night, but she completely denied it. At that point, I blocked her. This was just too weird, and I wanted to put it behind me. When I blocked her, I did feel better, but I also knew that she seemed to know where I lived. I had a feeling that she might show up again, and unfortunately, I was right. That very same night, she was back. This time though, she knocked on my front door. I was in the kitchen when I heard it, and I think it was about 8 p.m. I walked over to the front door, and after looking out and seeing the woman, I moved back. However, after she knocked again, I heard the woman then shouting at me that she knew I was home. She demanded that I let her in. I went to the door, and without opening it, I shouted that I was calling the police if she didn't leave. But this didn't stop her. She stayed at my front door, occasionally knocking on it. When I realized that she wasn't leaving, I did call the police. I stayed in my living room near the front door. The woman remained there the entire time. About 15 minutes later, the police got there. I heard the woman arguing with them for a while. Eventually, though, they got her to leave me alone. She was told that if she came back to my property again, she would be arrested. I was afraid that she would, but luckily, after that, I didn't see her again. I really don't know what her problem with me was. I also don't know how she even found me in the first place. After this happened, I contacted the one mutual friend that I had with the woman to find out more. Like I said, the mutual friend that we had was a guy that I barely knew. We had gone to high school together but never really talked much. We knew who each other were though. When I asked him, he told me that he honestly had no clue when he became friends with the woman or who she was, so I didn't really get much clarification there. I'm just happy that the woman actually left me alone after that. I've had a Facebook account for many years now. I think that I made one when I was about 13 or 14 years old. And this is something that happened back then. I'm not sure exactly when it was, but I know I was a teenager. So I would go on Facebook all the time, probably several times a day on average. Well, one time I ended up getting hacked. The way I found out was that I got a text from one of my friends from school. She told me that she thought my account had been hacked. I logged into Facebook and saw that my account had made several bizarre and random posts late the previous night. Some of them were as if somebody had just dragged their hand across the keyboard and hit send. Others were strange sentences of words that didn't really make much sense. I was really embarrassed. There were even a few comments from friends with question marks on some of the posts. I didn't know who would do this to me or who would know my password. As I scrolled down on my page, I saw that there were even more posts that were made from my account. I quickly changed my password, then looked at them. Most of the posts were made within a 2-hour window the previous night, from about midnight to 2 a.m. There were about 20 posts in total. Then I got to one of the first ones that had been made. This post was the only one with a photo attached to it. It was a picture at nighttime of the house that I lived in. At the time, I lived there with my parents and 2 older siblings. The post said, "This is where I live, everyone." It looked like the photo had been taken from our driveway, possibly the street. When I saw that, I was so creeped out. But since I changed my password, whoever this was would not have access anymore. I quickly deleted every post that they had made on my account. Then I wrote a post saying how my account had been hacked the previous night, and the posts were not made by me. But after that, I never found out who did it. I asked several friends, wondering if it was a joke or something, but they all denied it. I've even asked some of them years later, but nobody ever admitted it. And to be honest, I just don't think that it was any of my friends. It could have been someone I went to school with, possibly, or somebody that I don't know at all. I never found out. But the fact that they seemingly were at my house after midnight really gives me the creeps.
This happened about a year ago. I went to a Burger King with my friend Emily. It was probably about 8 p.m. and we sat down in a booth to eat. Emily and I were just chatting and joking around, having a good time like always. We had been there for maybe 20 minutes when a man who was a Burger King employee walked over to us. He was sort of average height, with a little bit large build, and had dark hair. Immediately, I was wondering what he wanted. Burger King is not the type of restaurant where you have a waiter. It's not even the kind of restaurant where people usually come over and ask how the food is or anything like that. It's just a fast food place. He said hi, looking at both me and Emily. We said hi to him, and then there was an awkward silence. He started having like a casual conversation with us. I remember he said something like, "How are you guys doing?" or "What are you guys doing?" We were both confused and just told him that we were eating and talking to each other. He kept hanging around though. He was standing right next to the table. That's when Emily asked what the guy wanted. He acted all insulted and was like, "What did I do?" I thought he might be joking, and that's when the guy helped himself to a seat. He scooted in and sat right next to me on the bench of the booth. We sort of laughed it off, but I know I was secretly wanting him to leave, and I thought it was really uncomfortable. I'm sure Emily felt the same way too. Then, he asked us if we could go order him some food. That's when he started getting rude. We asked him to leave, and he just kept sitting there, and we argued with him for a while. It wasn't like a big scene or anything, and we weren't shouting, but we were going back and forth. Finally, he angrily got up and left us at the table. We watched him walk away and out the door. He'd been talking to us for a total of almost 10 minutes. Emily and I were really annoyed by this. We decided to go up and complain, to let them know that one of the employees had been harassing us. When we walked up there, there was a woman behind the counter. I said to her that there was an employee that had been really rude to us. The woman at the register looked annoyed. She said, "Yeah, and he was fired earlier." She went on to say that he had been fired just earlier that night, and she had thought that he left. The area we were sitting in was not visible to the front counter. She apologized and gave us a gift card for the trouble. We were also offered free ice cream. We accepted the offer and went back to sit down in the booth. We were there for maybe 10 more minutes, and then we left. After we got outside, we started walking to my car. I had drove from my house, which was really close by. When we were walking to my car, we saw the same employee step out of one of the cars that was parked in the parking lot. He started approaching us. Without giving it a second thought, Emily and I both sprinted for my car. As we did, he started running towards us. We got to my car as quickly as possible and got inside and locked the doors. It was probably the fastest amount of time that we possibly could have done it in. He reached the car just moments later. He tried opening Emily's door on the side. It was locked though. I backed away and left the parking lot. I was afraid that the guy would follow us home, but thankfully he didn't. This was definitely my scariest experience at a Burger King. I'm not sure why the guy was fired from Burger King, but he clearly had some problems. What his intentions were, I don't know, but hopefully Emily and I don't see him again. This happened not too long ago. After a long day of work, I was driving home and starving hungry. I stopped at a McDonald's because it was just about the only place still open. After getting there, I decided to park in the parking lot and go inside to order. The drive-thru line was sort of long, and I thought it might be faster to just order inside. When I got inside the building, nobody else was in there other than employees. One employee stood behind the counter, and I walked up and ordered. After ordering, the employee went into the back and told me that they would be out with my order shortly. I then stood there, getting hungrier and hungrier by the second. As I waited, I glanced around the empty restaurant. That's when I noticed what appeared to be two men. They were not inside the restaurant exactly, but in the space between the first doors you walk in and then the second set of doors. The thing that really caught my attention though was that they were wearing masks. The masks looked like they were possibly from some movie or something, but they were really creepy. The guys just stood there inside. I looked away and continued to wait for my order. Probably about a minute later, the door opened and I saw the two men walking in. They made their way immediately to the left and inside the seating area of the restaurant. Then they went out of sight. The fact that they were not going up to order, but almost going to hide, was kind of concerning to me. Could they be planning to rob the place or something? That's what went through my head at first, but I quickly pushed that thought away. No way, I told myself. I stood there waiting for probably 2 more minutes. Then a McDonald's employee emerged from the back with my bag. I took it, and in that moment, considered letting the employee know about the men in masks who had gone inside. But ultimately, I decided not to. I walked away and left the restaurant. I did wonder, though, who those guys were and what they were doing. I was second-guessing myself the whole way as I walked out to my car in the parking lot. Maybe I should have said something. But as I was reaching my vehicle, I heard a noise behind me. I turned around as I was just a couple of feet away from my car door. When I did, I saw both of the two men running at me in a full sprint. They had just left the building, and there was no question that they were headed straight for me. I quickly unlocked my car, opened the door, and jumped inside of it. I hit the lock button, and the guys reached my car in less than 5 seconds. They tried opening my doors, and then started aggressively banging on my windows. I did the obvious thing, which was to back up and drive away. The men both kept hitting and kicking at my car as I did. Then they ran off to the far side of the McDonald's building. I got out of there as quickly as I could and then called the police when I was safely on the road. I'm sure the men probably ran off before the police got there, but I hope they were able to find them. Apparently, the men had targeted me. I'm not sure if that was their plan the entire time, if maybe they had been watching me, waiting for me to go in, or maybe they just decided to after seeing me inside. Who knows? What I do know is I'm really glad that I'm okay.
"6 years ago, I worked at a Burger King. At the time back then, it was the only job that I could find in my area close to where I lived. I should mention I'm a female and I was recently out of high school. Working there was okay for the most part. Some of my coworkers were pretty cool, but others were weird. One of those weird ones was my manager, Jason. I thought Jason was strange from the first time that I got a job there and was hired. I mostly tried to avoid him because he would always have weird conversation with people and give weird looks. He also added me on Facebook early on. He would post some really strange things. The guy just overall seemed odd. He never really did anything that crazy at work, but a lot of little things. I only worked at the Burger King for a total of 4 months. When I was able to find a different job, I quit and started working somewhere else. I think about 2 months after I left Burger King, I got home from my new job one night to see a car parked in front of my house. I didn't recognize it, so it was a little bit strange, but when I looked closer, I saw that the car was off and nobody appeared to be inside. I went inside after that. I lived with my parents, and by this time it was late, probably like 11 p.m., and they had already gone to bed. I changed, took a shower, and then got into my bedroom. After I got in bed, I looked out my window, which was next to it, and I saw the car on the street still parked where it had been earlier. But this time, it looked like somebody was inside the driver's seat and moving around. I stood up and got closer to the window to get a better look. When I did, I finally saw who it was. The driver appeared to look right at me as I was looking out at them, and it was my old boss, Jason, from Burger King. We made eye contact for about a second, and afterwards, he looked over and I saw him suddenly start the car and then drive off. I couldn't believe my eyes. I hadn't been expecting to see him at all, and this was pretty creepy. The next day, I drove back to the Burger King where I had worked. I walked inside and found the person working behind the counter. Thankfully, it was morning time and not very busy yet, and I wanted an explanation for what had happened. I didn't recognize the person working and had never seen them when I was there. I asked him if Jason was there. The guy behind the counter shook his head and said he wasn't sure who that was. I then saw someone who I had been a coworker with named Chris. He walked over and said hi to me. I asked him if Jason was working. He told me no, Jason had been fired a month earlier. When I asked more, he didn't know exactly why he had been fired. All he knew was he didn't work there anymore. I told him about seeing Jason outside my house the night before. He told me that he hadn't seen Jason since before he was fired, but he said after I had quit, Jason talked about me a lot, and he found it creepy. I was really angry hearing this. I left and went back home,
I didn't really think anything could be done about it. It didn't seem like he had done anything illegal, because he never actually went into my yard. I was nervous that night, and I had a hard time getting to sleep, but thankfully, I didn't see Jason or his car. I figured I scared him off when I saw him the previous night. The next few nights, I didn't see him either. But about a week later, when I was sleeping in the middle of the night, I woke up to hear noises coming from my window. I was really dazed at first from being asleep, but quickly woke up when I saw the figure of a man taking up my whole bedroom window. I turned the lights on and screamed, and he quickly disappeared. My parents woke up from across the hall and ran in. We called the police after that. When they arrived, I told them everything. Luckily, Jason ended up being caught. When I had just graduated from high school, I worked at a McDonald's for the summer before college. My name is Jess, and this took place probably almost 10 years ago now. I was working one night, and it was probably like 10 or 11 o'clock. I got off a short time after that, and at that point, I'd been working there for maybe 2 months total. Things were really quiet, and had been for the past few hours. I was working in the drive-thru, and I'd been doing that a lot at the time. A car pulled in, which was the first one in at least 5 minutes. When they stopped at the intercom, I spoke and asked to take their order. There appeared to be a man driving, and instead of ordering, he just asked, "Is this Jess speaking?" It caught me off guard. Was this somebody that I knew? I didn't recognize him. How could he know my name? I paused before saying, "Why are you asking?" He responded by saying that he knew it was me and he recognized my voice. I asked the man if I knew him because I was 90% sure that I didn't. He responded by saying no, I didn't know him. I asked the man if he was going to order anything, and he paused, and then he said he would just see me later tonight, and then drove off. He sped through the rest of the drive-thru area after that. It was an extremely weird thing to happen, and I hoped that the man was just joking. I worked for maybe only 30 minutes or so after that, and then I was off for the night. I lived at my parents' house back then, which was about a little under a 10-minute drive from the McDonald's that I worked at. Afterwards, I drove home. My neighborhood was pretty typical, but when I pulled onto my street, I drove down to my house, which was the fifth one down from the end. I saw a car parked out right in front of my driveway, but to the side between my house and my neighbor's. I had never seen it before. My heart started to race. I realized that it was the same car that had been in the drive-thru. I guess this guy was serious when he said he would see me later. But who was he, and how did he know where I lived? I pulled into my driveway, which is something that I instantly regretted. I saw the car start, and then begin going into reverse. It parked so that it was completely blocking me in my driveway. I got out of the car right then and there, and sprinted for the front door of my house. When I got there, it was locked. I started banging on it and trying to open it frantically. My keys were somewhere in my pockets, and I guess I was just so panicked that I didn't think to grab them. After probably 10 seconds, which felt like an hour, my mom opened up the door. I got inside, slammed the door shut, and then locked it. Then I explained to my parents what had happened. We looked outside, and the car was still there. My dad then took a step outside. I'm not sure if he was going to confront the man, or just get a better look, but as soon as he did, the car sped off. It didn't come back that night, and the next day, I told my manager at McDonald's about it. Unfortunately, there's not really much anybody could do. The problem was, the car the guy drove was really typical, just a black four-door sedan, and looked maybe 5 to 10 years old or so. I'm not even sure what make it was. I personally don't think I ever encountered the guy again, and luckily, I didn't work at the McDonald's much longer after that. Like most people, I've been to McDonald's probably over 100 times. Last year, I lived in an apartment building that was within a walking distance of a McDonald's. It was right down the street and then across another one. It took maybe 10 minutes at most for me to get there, and I took advantage of this several times on late nights when I was really hungry. One night, a few months ago, it was really late, but I was starving. I think it was a Friday night, and I had been out late. I got back home, but wasn't really that tired. However, I was starving. I walked over to the McDonald's and then went inside and ordered on the touchscreen that they had. Nobody else was in there at this hour, and when I got my food, I took the bag and left to walk back to my house. This McDonald's had the back parking lot up against a wooded area. It was kind of on the edge of the shopping area, and then it led to a more residential area, which is where my apartment was. There was a long sidewalk that went along the side of it, and I would walk that and then cross the street. As I was walking down the sidewalk, all by myself, I soon started to hear footsteps behind me. They were maybe 100 feet back, so pretty far. I'm not sure why, but I looked behind me. Maybe it was because of how quiet things were. There were really no cars on the road, and nobody else was out walking for sure. When I looked though, I saw a man dressed as Ronald McDonald, the full suit and everything. It wasn't Halloween time either, so this was super strange. Why was there some guy dressed as Ronald McDonald at 1 o'clock in the morning? He was walking behind me on the path, as if he had just emerged from the woods or something. Eventually, I crossed the street. I didn't expect Ronald McDonald to cross as well, but he did. He was still pretty far behind me, but the longer I walked and he remained behind me, the more nervous I felt. Eventually, I made it back to my apartment complex. The guy was still following me, and still about the same distance behind. The way he was walking was sort of creepy too. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but it wasn't just an average walk. It was sort of slow and robotic almost. I was in a hurry now to get inside, and I got to my apartment building and went in. I got up to my unit, which was on the 4th floor, and went inside. I felt so much better to be off the streets with that weirdo. I wasn't really sure where he ended up going, because I hadn't cared to look behind me. I went into my bedroom in my apartment and looked outside. When I did, I saw the Ronald McDonald guy standing in the parking lot, staring right up at my window at me. He was expressionless and didn't move. I was super creeped out by this now. I closed the blinds to my window, and then closed the blinds to every other window that I had. I did my best to ignore the whole situation after that, and the next day, he was gone. I'm not sure who the guy was or why he followed me, and looking back, that was a super creepy thing for the guy to do, whoever he was.